Yep, so we're recording again. So anything goes in this little part. But yeah, I think that's the one thing that we're all kind of missing, is actually getting out to the festivals and sort of talking, doing the master classes. As nice as this is to do virtual talk, it's totally different as well.
Yeah, and actually it's quite funny because when you see it from a company point of view, you can see on the internet that a lot of companies are trying to reach out to consumers and do all these live tasting, Instagram stories, and so on. And I mean, I just hope the world after is not that world, because I mean it would be really sad. I'm really looking forward to go on a show. I mean, I think the contact with people is much better than these. I mean, it was nice talking to you this afternoon.
Yeah.
It would have been even better if we were in the tasting room at the distillery.
Exactly, yeah. And talking of tasting, I'll just put it onto the screen with everybody. What is everybody actually drinking at the moment? I mean, I've sort of drunk my Amérique, so I only had the one sample. And the closest to a French thing I can get to now is...
Simon, I'm worse. I have water today.
Well, I've gone on to the Auchentoshan Bordeaux, fully matured Bordeaux cask.
Unsurprisingly, I'm on the Stella.
Oh, Stella.
I'm now going to some other French.
Oh, how is it like? I've not tasted these two actually.
Irradé.
Yeah.
Pas mal.
I've been on this earlier.
What's the one, Chris?
It's a Volson French rye.
Yeah, that's from the Domaine des Hautes Glaces.
Yeah.
No? Yeah.
Anybody else got any balls?
The only French thing I could find was some Armagnac. So I had some Armagnac. And then some of this, but I think that's just Scotch whiskey, but matured in France.
Yeah.
What I understand.
Which one?
Couvreur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couvreur, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Quite surprised nobody's holding up any Bren.
I just have a sample from my whiskey tasting. It's a Glengoyne 1997.
Ooh, nice. Nice. How are you finding that one?
I kind of like it quite a lot, actually. I'm usually into heavy sherry casks.
Yeah.
Recently tasted the Glenallachie Muscatel finish.
Right.
That was pure magic.
Nice.
So I have to muster up some money to order it. But living in Norway, the taxes are insane.
I think you and the Irish people that are normally on here have something in common there.
Marcus should be complaining.
Yeah.
If we order a bottle of whiskey, then we have to calculate paying the double once we get it.
Yeah.
So I ordered a bottle of Glengoyne Teapot Dram yesterday.
All right, after the lockdown.
Yes, and it cost me £174 with shipping. And then when it gets to Norway, I know I have to pay about £350.
Blooming heck.
Mhm.
I would have somebody buy it for you and send it over as a bottle of wine or something.
Was
So
it bowling pin?
Maybe I have to talk to you later on.
Yeah, no, that's terrible. What is the price of teapot? It's about £80.
70, 80 quid, is it not?
No, it has risen to 90, I think.
90, yeah. But it is a fine dram.
I believe. I received an email from Glengoyne and the new batch. I think it's 110.
110.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is the problem with whiskies. I find it's extremely expensive, and the prices are going up all the time. And one thing I got from yesterday, which I found extremely good, the chap from Rassay, is it Alistair Day, was chatting, and they've got their inaugural release coming up, I think, at the end of this year, and that's coming out at about £99, I believe he said. So he's brought it down that sub £100, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I think £100 almost seems to be the norm of it, because when Glasgow Distillery's first one came out at 100, their subsequent ones are now £50 a bottle, but
Yeah.
£100 seems to be.
Yeah, I think
on the
that's
mark.
where it's kind of going. That side, you know, the £100 upwards seem to be the mark, and it's nice that they've brought it in at less than £100, which brings me very nicely onto the fact of they've actually come to us as well and offered us a virtual tasting with the breakdown of their inaugural cask, if anybody's interested.
Yep. Sign me up.
Yeah, we'll chat about that when we go off. I don't want to say too much on here, so.
By the sounds of the teapot, I mean, obviously that's probably been a popular one for Glengoyne, but it seems like that's going the same way as the Aberlour, you know, Abuna. Like the price is just rocketing for what is essentially, you know, I know it's good stuff, but it's essentially a non-age statement.
Yeah.
Whiskey that they put in it.
Have you got any sort of big sherry bomb type whiskies coming out, David?
Not really. We could do one, but with the sherry cask is the most sherry we have right now, and it's really not a sherry bomb. You can't call it a sherry bomb. I mean, Frank, would you call that a sherry bomb? This one?
Well, it's you can't find the flavors of the sherry behind the whiskey, but they are not the first thing you have on the mouth.
No, they're not dominant like
No.
you would expect from a sherry bomb.
And it's a single cask, and it has been matured 14 years in Oloroso cask.
Yep.
But there's a kind of charred or smoke note in the whiskey. Yeah. It's delightful. I love it, and I'm glad I've got 2 bottles at home. But it's not like for example, the big sherried whiskies you can have from someone talked about the Abunad, for example. It's not like this.
No.
And the sherry surely influenced on the liquid, but you don't have the tannins. You don't have the winey notes in this whiskey, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm going to say that double maturation, it was extremely nicely balanced, and you did get a lot of bourbon characteristic in there, rather than a lot of sherry.
Yeah, which is funny because there's no bourbon in it, but I agree. The thing is, we get using the Britannic cask, we get a nice, sweet flavor that can actually remind a little bit of bourbon.
Yeah. I suppose by the bourbon, I mean, those vanillas and things like that from the cask. I wasn't sort of saying bourbon, but yeah, the vanillas, the sort of fruitiness rather than the sherry side of it.
Yeah.
Right, so we get back to Terroir then. So everybody doesn't seem to want to talk too much about anything else. So keep getting some messages saying we need to get back to it. So
can you guys hear me now?
No.
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you now.
We can hear you.
What's in your glass, Sarah?
I've got an Ocontoshon, Sweet Surrender, Society bottling.
Nice. Are you trying to impress Sorrow?
I don't know if I've had that one,
No, I'm just delighted to try it.
I don't know if
I've bought the one bottle that Soren doesn't have.
I'm just looking on the back shelf because my SMWS is about there. Oh no, I know. Yeah, I think that is one I haven't got. Yeah, never mind. It can't be very good.
Oh, thanks.
So going back to the Terroir thing, How? I mean, I know your take on it, Ed, because you know you like the idea of knowing as much information as possible. But what do other people think? You know, is it more important for you to have a good whiskey and then a backup story, or do you actually find the notion of knowing which field it's come from, or you know what the soil type was? Do you find that important to enhance your whiskey tasting? Anybody?
Isn't this
Not particularly.
sort of moot though, given that the whole Waterford Finn's just been blown up and it's a big mess?
Yeah.
It's a marketing gimmick. I think.
The bottom line is, if the whiskey tastes good, we're going to drink it.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. If you're going to start talking about whether soil and all that kind and aspects and climate makes a difference on what something tastes like, then from my point of view, doing the job that I do on a daily basis, you have to have everything growing in the same soil in order to see the difference that it makes on different plants or barleys or whatever. Otherwise, there's just no point in calling it an experiment because it's not under the same conditions.
Yeah, I mean that's one argument I've had, that if you've got different barleys coming out, if you've got, say, if you manage to find 1,000 tons of barley and you got it from the same field and it was all the same soil type, and you sent that out to 5 different distilleries, you're going to have 5 different whiskies. So therefore, how important in the theory of it was the soil and the barley strain in the first place, because you've got 5 different types of whiskey at the end of it.
My sort of thing is, you know,
variables, and that's not what they're doing.
Yeah. What I sort of see is like other parts of the whiskey process, the yeast, the fermentation times, the type of still shape, the cask. You pick those to get certain flavors and certain profiles out of them that's generally repeatable.
Yeah.
With taking barley from a certain field, that's never going to be repeatable, because as Soren said, the soil will change year on year, the weather, the climate's going to change. So what is it you're wanting to get out of having individual
not
fields
under
being
controlled
used?
conditions?
Yeah, there's no control. At the end, you go, it might taste different, it might taste great, but I cannot repeat that process in any way, shape, or form.
Don't get me wrong, it's nice to know where something comes from, and this is where we've said before, terroir is not the right word. Provenance is. It's knowing where something comes from, how it was grown, what barley grain was used, all that kind of stuff. That's what I find interesting. But to call it terroir and not have it under proper experimental controls, then it makes no
I mean, to be fair to Waterford, they are not just focusing on terroir. It may seem like it from their marketing team, but you know, they talk about traceability and they talk about transparency a lot. And I think that you know,
that's the bit I find interesting.
Yeah. There's been too much focus on what is,
they,
you know,
picked a bad word for marketing.
An experiment for them. You know, they're going to peer review it. There are loads of other parties involved, other than Waterford, who are kind of interested in the outcomes of you know, what is a 3-year experiment.
Yeah, I think what Soren said though, that you know, the left hand's not talking about the right hand.
Yeah, he must
We can see you looking bored in the background.
I've just been on about a 3-hour Zoom chat myself, so I'm a bit tired.
No, brilliant. Did you get your, because I think you had problems with one of your, was it the Instagram or the Twitter or something you had?
Yeah, I know. My Facebook got hacked, my Instagram went with it, and I've not been able to get it back, which is pretty devastating.
Yeah. No, we know what it's like to get hacked. We got hacked the other night on the virtual taste with David. Yeah, that was quite interesting.
I've heard about this, but no one's actually said anything about like what actually happened. Can I ask now?
Just a bit of porn, you know, good old-fashioned porn came up.
Just casual Sunday afternoon porn, or just
Thursday night porn?
Was it a Sunday?
I think it was a Thursday afternoon session.
Thursday night porn.
Bearing in mind we are still recording, I don't want to say too much, but yeah, it was. I don't think I've panicked so much at this end, trying to get all the hell to stop everything and get everything off. I'm just glad.
Quite literally, by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
And share the wrong screen, Soren.
Well, I'm just glad it wasn't halfway through the tasting, you know, and sort of David sat there sort of having a chat and, yeah, somebody's bare ass in the screen. It was very interesting.
Not ideal then.
Back to the whiskey.
I think for the future, sir, I think you can lock people presenting.
I mean, I think the big mistake was that we actually opened it up to the public arena, and that was obviously my mistake. We won't make that again.
Don't let the nutters in.
Pardon?
Don't let the nutters in.
Well, I just thought there was a lot of interest.
Just the nutters that you know well.
Yeah, there was a lot of interest from you know what seemed to be people interested in whiskey. You kind of think if they're gonna come on, then you know they could have turned the camera off. That wouldn't have been as bad. But yeah, it was a very interesting. I think it's the most interesting tasting I've been on.
Yeah.
I've heard that this is a problem with Zoom. If you don't use the password, then suddenly you have 6 people doing their own thing on camera.
Yeah, that was the problem. That you know, it was the link was put out into the open, and basically anybody could come in, which obviously meant I didn't know a lot of the names, so I'd kind of let everyone. I think we had about 35 people waiting.
Yeah.
And I was just literally clicking and clicking and clicking, and the next thing, bang. Well,
literally.
Bang's probably the right word as well.
Use the words there.
Yeah, it was an extremely interesting. What seemed like probably half an hour to me, which was probably about 3 seconds to everybody else. just panicking, trying to hit every button on the keyboard.
Everything was slow motion. You were like, no.
Yeah, it was extremely interesting. But anyway, come on, let's get back to whiskey. At least,
It was me.
Like I say, this is recording, so this will be going up at some point. We don't want to be talking about porn all night.
Sorry, you told it, yeah.
This is my fiance Emma. You'll see her about in the background.
Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Hi. I've got a question for David.
Yeah.
You said you're using organic barley. With your continued experimentations of wine casks and whatever, I've got friends in France who are very much into organic and biodynamic wines and using, you know, working with those vineyards. Is that something you'd be looking to do as well? So it links up the whole organic line.
Yeah, sure. We're actually the my guy you saw on the cask is making organic Sauvignon.
Okay.
And, I mean, the more we can find organic wines, we will try to get. The good thing in France with the legislation on organic whiskey is that we don't need to have every cask we use organic or new oak, which is a good thing, I guess.
Hmm.
And do you plan to advertise on the organic side of your whiskey, or put it on the label or something?
I've not decided yet whether it's going to be on the front label or the back label. The only thing is I don't want people to think that because it's organic whiskey it will taste different. I mean, we've been, now I have the knowledge of it, and the same barley strain, organic, non-organic, doesn't make much of a difference once it's distilled.
No.
So I don't want people to, believe that organic will be different. Organic is just about growing the barley.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
Do you have any difficulties with organic barley? Because in England, if you try to get organic barley, you have a lot of troubles with consistency. So one month you might be able to get all the barley that you want, but the next month you'll have a lot of problems because they won't be able to produce enough. Is that the same in France, or do you not have these problems?
We had the problem maybe 4 years ago. We couldn't get as much as we wanted to, or one day we could get and the other day not. But in the past 2-3 years, there haven't been any issues. The thing is, France is a big producer for barley, and our malter, the malter we use. Castle Maltings in Belgium, they have very good supply of organic barley, so we don't have problems. But
that was awkward.
Sorry about that. I don't know.
I should be grateful to everyone else.
Sophie asks one question.
You didn't suddenly all get a lot of palm then, did you?
Chance to be a fine fin.
More than usual.
I don't know what happened then. It just cut me out. I've paid the bill, honest. Yeah, that was sorry. What did I miss there? We was talking about organic.
The malters in Belgium.
From Castle Maltings, you said that you've kind of just realised that if you're gonna use organic, you're gonna have to put up with the consistency problems, I guess.
Yeah. Depending on the batch. I mean, last year, depending on the batch of barley, sometimes we could get up to maybe 390 liter of pure alcohol per ton, and the next batch would be 370. So it doesn't impact the flavors and aromas too much, but the yield can be really different. And maybe this last year we made 160,000 liters of pure alcohol, but maybe next year it's going to be 140. I mean, once you start working with organic, you have to, deal with that. That's part of the fun.
And is there a lot of organic barley grown in France then, or is it quite small?
No. There's quite a lot of organic barley grown, and a lot of the brewers in France, medium breweries, a lot of them are actually working with organic barley now. So it's growing.
I mean, one question I was going to ask earlier, but we might as well do it in this session because it's probably a little bit more easier. Obviously, with yourselves, where you can't put an age statement on, how does everybody feel about age statements? Do we think they're important or not?
Not really. A good indication. For me, it's not important. I think we've all had plenty of non-age statement whiskies over the last few years that have been fantastic. But knowing an age of it can give you an indication of what to expect from it. It's not necessarily quality, but it'll give you an idea that if it's a cherry finished one, then you'll get an idea of what to expect from a flavour profile if you know it's a 10-year-old or an 18-year-old.
Yeah, that's very true. Ultimately, it's just about transparency and giving you more information when you drink something.
But it goes back to having as much information as you can, really. Obviously, like Compass Box brought out their one, which was, I think it was a 3-year-old whiskey, but actually it only had like 0.01% of 3-year-old whiskey. Again, because they got in trouble for putting, what was actually in their blends.
They did that on purpose, though, didn't they? They brought that out as a 3-year-old whiskey to prove that it's a load of rubbish in the sense of, I mean, I'm down the line of, yes, it's nice to have an age statement on there, but I also think I would rather maybe not have an age statement on there. I would rather have a little bit like Compass Box did, a little bit like JJ Corrie have done, where you have a breakdown of what whiskies are in the bottle, but without an age statement. So you can determine, right, yeah, there is some 3-year-old whiskey in there, but there's as much 27-year-old whiskey in there. And that's the way I would like to see things going, because, yeah, I mean, you know, I can look around this room now and see age statements all over the place, and it doesn't, to me, it doesn't give me any indication of what I'm going to be drinking. It just means, yeah, that's a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old whiskey, and that's as much as
just a number, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really right. You know, ultimately, the number, it doesn't mean as much as we think it does, and actually, kind of knowing the vatting is much more interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also, if you look at countries that are different climate to ours, for example, India, you're going to get an older tasting whiskey for a younger amount of years because it's a quicker maturation.
Yeah.
So.
Like within the sort of current regulations, when obviously you're not allowed to do that breakdown, I know some have done it on the website stuff. I suppose it does give an indication of when you know the pricing of things in some ways. So if there's a non-age statement that they were trying to sell for £500 or 1,000 or 12,000, you know,
I mean,
and they weren't able to give you any information about what was in it. At least with the age, you can kind of go, you know, they've done it because of the rarity or whatever.
I think Fiona's just brought an interesting thing up. She's put that age is useful when deciding the order of drinking from the same distillery. And to be honest with you, I kind of disagree with that because I think it's more about the alcohol percentage than the age percentage. Because you could have a 20-year-old whiskey that's brought out at 43, but you could have a 6-year-old whiskey that's brought out at, say, 50%. And to me, you would probably put the younger whiskey second.
Well, didn't Lagavulin do that?
Pardon?
Didn't Lagavulin do that? Didn't they do an 8-year-old and it was a bit stronger than the 12-year-old?
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of goes into a really interesting point in that, you know, if you have a 10-year-old whiskey that's peated versus a 25-year-old whiskey that's peated, that peat influence is you know, it's going to have mellowed, and so you know you could argue that the 25-year-old would be more easy drinking in a way than the 10-year-old.
It's the same with Bowmore as well, because Bowmore's 15. I'd defo drink 12, 18, and then 15 darker.
Yeah.
Rather than any other way around.
But isn't it the age that's giving you that information then?
Pardon?
Isn't it the age statement that's giving you that information to work out what order to drink? And we're not saying that you'd necessarily have the oldest last or whatever, but by having that information gives you an idea of what order to do. Although
I think it depends on what you're looking for in your tasting. If you're doing, say, for argument's sake, a Glenfiddich, and you want to go through the range, you are going to go by age. And I get that. But to me, if you're trying to explain to people about the variances and you take away the age, then the cask makeup and the ABV have got to come before the age.
That's something I experienced in September. I was at Whisky Life Paris show, and I was behind the stand with the guys from the New Zealand whiskies, and we organized a tasting. And we began with the oldest one, the 21-year-old, because it was the sweeter one, the lighter one.
Yeah.
And many times people who are not as familiar as we are with the whiskey, they were amazed that we will begin the tasting with the oldest whiskey we had on the stand.
So whenever I do a tasting, I always start with the lowest ABV and or lowest peat, because they're just going to ruin your taste buds. There's no point in starting with a high ABV because your taste buds are just going to be burnt out. And everything afterwards, you're not going to be tasting it properly. So I always work up to the highest ABV.
Yeah, it's like you go from lowest ABV to highest, lightest whiskey, you know, like move bourbon to sherry, for example.
Yeah, don't start with a Freud.
Unless you really hate the person.
Don't start with sherry, Lefroy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've certainly got to look at the makeup of the whiskey. I think when we look at it, everything is important. So yes, you can have the age statements, and you can run through the age statements if we're using, like I said earlier, Glenfiddich. You know, you can say, look, this is a 12-year-old. This is how it jumps to the 15, to the 18, to the 21. It's nice because they're very similar in ABV. I guess when you start to look at distilleries, say like Abelard, where you could go from the 10 to the 12 to the, I think is it 16, and then to the Abuna. You've got to look at the ABVs as well as everything else. So if you've got, you know, it's nice if you've got a range of whiskies that are all the same ABV, because then it makes it, as Chris said, you would go in age order, and the age then becomes important depending on the makeup. If you go back and your first one at 8 years old is a sherry bomb, and your 21 is a refill bourbon, you've then got to swap it around again.
It comes down to having as much information about a whiskey as you can. You know,
that's why I like Bruichladdich, because Bruichladdich did for a while. They did was it like a lot number or something on the back of the one of the tins that you can just put into the website? Is that right? I feel like
I think the classic Laddie. Yeah, the classic Laddie does that.
But you can find out the entire makeup of it, which I thought was ace, but that must be a way around the loophole because.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I mean, is that something you've looked at, David? Bringing in the information on a website that you can go back to see exactly what age it is, or again, can you not even put it on the website that it's a 10-year-old?
I really think we don't even have the right to mention it on the website. But I mean, as long as we can, you know, mention distilled in, bottled in, then that would work. That would be actually quite interesting to disclose the entire vatting instead of the age statement. I don't know how they would react, because that would be fun to try. I might try.
I think the EU guidelines is for a bottle. Obviously, it just has to be the youngest whiskey, and that's why people like Bruichladdich and Compass Box got in trouble. Because they tried to give you more information, but for some reason legally that wasn't allowed.
I think in France, if I were to, let's say, do an Armoury Classic mentioning that there's 1% of 3-year-old whiskey and 99% of 10-year-old whiskey, I don't think that would be allowed, because obviously it's a little like bending the rules.
But then if you put there is 1% of 2015, but 90% of 2002, then you're getting around it. And
I don't know, because usually when you mention the vintage, 100% of what's in the bottle has to be from that vintage. You're not allowed to blend vintages technically.
Right.
I mean, you want to mention it. So,
because you see, this is something we had with Neve from JJ Corey, where they were saying that they were put in that there was a certain amount of 27-year-old whiskey, a certain amount of 17-year-old, a certain amount of 13, and a certain amount of 10-year-old. And now they've been stopped doing that as well. And you just kind of think, where, especially in the food market, where you've basically got to disclose everything. And then it comes to the whiskey and it's like, oh no, you can't say that, or you can't say that. And you think it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I really don't understand where is the problem? Because obviously if I write 10 years old, then someone can come to the distillery and ask me, do you have the proof to prove me that it's 10 years old? As long as I can prove it, then I don't see where is the problem.
Can you not say it's between 9 and 11 years old?
Sorry?
Can you not say it's between 9 and 11 years old?
No, I mean, last year when I was at first not allowed to bottle it, I was looking at all the way to, invent something, to make people understand that it was 10 years old, but not saying it was 10 years old.
What you should actually maybe say is 10 years ago when I was working in the distillery and we laid this cask down.
Well, Roman numerals, just put a big X on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, you could have coded names for it.
Yeah, the X was a solution we came out with. The other one was Armoric Voldemort. You know, the one you shouldn't tell.
Can't mention.
Yeah.
There was a problem, David, with the 10-year-old, because I believe it was not a 10-year-old. Was it a 12-year-old whiskey?
No, the first one was 12, and the second one was 2/3 of 13 and 1/3 of 10.
Okay.
You see, this is a weird one because I mean I had a discussion with somebody several months ago, and I kind of was disagreeing with him a little bit on what he was saying, and he was telling us that let me get the distillery right. I believe it was the Glendronach 12 was actually 18-year-old whiskey. And my argument was, why would you sell a Glendronach 12 as 100% 18-year-old whiskey? And that seems strange that you can put an age statement on it that isn't a right age statement. So it does seem ludicrous that somebody in Scotland can do one thing and you can't even name an age statement.
I think I've heard something about this. I think it was with the 15-year-old.
No. I brought that up. No, it wasn't. It was the 12-year-old.
Okay. Because a few years ago, when the distilleries stopped, was mothballed. There was still some bottlings that would be released after that. And
it was nothing to do with that. Because I mean, in theory, if you look at the 21, the 18 is actually 21-year-old whiskey at the moment. But I suppose it's the same thing. But no, the argument was that they were selling the 12-year-old whiskey, and this is a few years ago, so it was nothing to do with the 15. But the 100% of the whiskey in the 12-year-old whiskey was 18-year-old whiskey. And to me, why would you do that? You would just discontinue the 12 and put it into the 18, surely.
Sure. They must have had like teaspoon or 12 in there, or at least say they had to get past it. But yeah, I suppose if your 12 is your best seller, at the end of the day, the cost of the whiskey that you've made doesn't really change.
No.
So if you sell 100 bottles of 12 compared to one bottle of 18, you'll make money selling 100 bottles of 12. If you discontinue that, you're only selling one of the 18. So I suppose it kind of works in that way. It doesn't make any sense for whiskey drinkers because we would have snapped it all up. But it's.
Didn't Ian say that they did something similar at Glenmoray the other week? Didn't they say the 21 was in fact a 24, 25 for a period?
Yeah, I think it's, the certainly
25 was a 28, I think, or the 28.
Yeah. But I mean, I think when you're getting sort of up there and you've got whiskies that are within a few years of each other, then it makes sense. If you're selling a 12-year-old, but it's got a massive amount of 15-year-old in, it makes sense. But it doesn't kind of make sense to have a 12-year-old that is 100% 18-year-old whiskey.
Well, I suppose if you look at Glenlivet, though, they had to discontinue the 12 and then brought out the Founders.
What's wrong with the Founders?
I've never actually had the Founders, to be honest, but they had to bring in something completely different to fill that gap in the market. And you might like it, Soren, but from other things I've seen, it's been much derided on.
Look, I mean, I think going back to the Founders, as soon as we brought it up, the Founders, there was nothing wrong with the Founders if it was drunk how it was meant to be drunk. So it was going.
Great to see you, David.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye, David.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much, David.
You all in
Take care.
The Founders was not designed to be mind-blowing whiskey. It was designed to be an entry-level whiskey to people who didn't drink a lot of whiskey. And as that type of whiskey,
it's fine.
You know, I mean, we all know the person that really slated it and decided to go out into a car park and smash it up with a sword.
Don't go there.
No, we don't. No, we don't. We don't all know that.
Don't you know that one?
No.
A certain chap that will remain
nameless.
That's the one. Decided to go out into a car park, a public car park from what I could see. I don't know. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. With a sword and smash the bottle up, which...
Where did you get the sword from?
Well, I mean, first of all, going down the street with a sword...
That's the more interesting story.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's kind of irresponsible. I get what he was
doing. It was Glasgow, that's standard.
I wasn't in Glasgow. I just think it was over the top, you know, I mean, and especially smashing a bottle in a public place where children and things like that could be, then, you know, it was quite ridiculous.
Look, we've all sort of heard of like funny stories of people going, well, it's so bad you just pour it down the sink. I mean, you know, I will never pour a whiskey down the sink. You know, if it's not neat, then
you wash your toes
mix it with something.
I mean, another funny one, which was the same chap, was he was drinking, I can't remember what bottle it was, but he was drinking a bottle of whiskey, and his review was, it was quite good, it was all right, blah, 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 and then he found out it had E150 in, so he poured it down the drain.
Oh, yes.
You know, and you just think, you know, look, I mean, I'm of the belief, and I get slated for it left, right, and centre. I'm of the belief there isn't really bad whiskey in the set. We know there is, don't get me wrong, but the whiskey is personal to each of us. And if we don't like a whiskey, it doesn't mean it's bad necessarily.
No.
It does not agree with our palate.
Yeah, it doesn't seem... Yeah.
But what Ian was saying last week was, you know, the process is quite, you know, for most distillers is similar. It's quite well regulated, so you can't really cut corners in the making of the product.
No.
But yeah, there's, as you say, depending on.
But the whole point of whiskey, and that's why we've got a group of probably 48 people now. We all like different types of whiskey. And if we all like the same whiskey, we wouldn't be sat here having a chat about whiskey, because there would only be one whiskey available to us. And
I don't know. I don't think Sophie's on the whiskey. I think she's on shots at the moment. I was sitting there watching you two necking your tequilas.
The sound your video at that point, and we could all just see you like.
Here we go, just like that.
The copper shot glasses.
Brilliant.
Hey,
brilliant.
It's a bit bad when listening to us a lot, it sends you to shots, isn't it?
Well,
I wondered if it was a Whisky Circus drinking game, and every time Soren says terroir, you've got.
We need to do that one day.
I'd be completely.
We'd all be on the floor by now.
Do you know what? I think the next one we do. Oh, what have we got next? We've got Ian from Glen Scotia. I mean, most of us must have Glen Scotia. So every time I say terroir, I think we all have to do a shot. And you know what? You're all going to be as sober as hell next week.
I'm going to have to take the Monday off work.
But no, I mean, you know, it's one of those things. We all like different whiskies. And look, I mean, I've been slated left, right, and centre for my blog because I try to be positive about everything I taste. And that's just the way I believe things are, you know. Everything has got something positive in it, so you try to find it rather than being negative about it for the sake of being negative. That's my personal stance. You know, other people look at it a different way. That's their prerogative.
Yeah.
When you're blogging about teachers, then?
Sorry?
When you're blogging about teachers?
When am I blogging about teachers?
Go on, be positive about that, I dare you.
I've got a bottle. But my bottle's from 1960, so it might be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's under the sink, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's under the sink.
No, it's
in the other room.
In the other room, yeah. It's in the other room. Let me go.
We need to have Soren bingo.
Yeah.
Can someone make up a table?
Yeah,
please?
it's
I'm
got
looking at you,
terroir, water in the other room.
Oh, yeah.
I think I've got one of those.
Finishers.
Drinking game table.
Yeah.
I bought some pumpkin spice rye of Amazon because that's a voucher. So I thought I'd give it a shot. It was it's
It's
horrible.
bad enough that it's in coffee.
It's pumpkin spice rye is absolutely horrible, and I think it'll make a decent old fashioned. So that's what I'll use it for. But it smelled like licking like an Airwick plug-in sort of thing. That's what it smelled like, and that's what it tasted like.
It tastes like cinnamon and nastiness.
But yeah, I'll throw it in old fashioned, and I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, there's a use for everything.
Pumpkin, anything's awful.
Oh God!
I disagree.
Oh,
I like pumpkin.
So basic.
Did we upset Soren?
No, I was just looking to see if I could find the teachers, but it's obviously boxed away somewhere. I was just
lockdown, huh?
No, I mean it's one of those though. You say that, Paul. We did a tasting with Steve Rush on one of the tweet tastings, and we drunk Grants. And I mean, my preconception of Grants was, I'm going to hate this. And to be honest with you, in that circumstance, on that night, they were actually pretty decent. You know,
There's worse blends than Grants for sure.
Yeah,
I quite liked it. The ale cast they done was actually all right.
I think the conception of blends being poor, you know, you look at.
80s
I mean,
throwback.
Yeah,
it's absolute rubbish.
It is, and you know, you look at teachers, you look at Grants, you look at trying to think.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
Never heard of that.
They outsell most single malts, so you know somebody's buying it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever try the?
You know.
I mean, it could be worse. You could be buying Auchentoshan and bartenders. You know what I mean?
Did anyone try the Whitey Mackay light they brought out?
12 billion flies eat shit. Doesn't mean that you're going to join them, are you?
What was that, Paul?
12 billion flies eat shit. You're not going to join them.
Depends how tasty it is.
Depends on the terroir.
Hey, if 12 million flies are eating it, there's got to be something in it.
No, but it's like Fujikai, isn't it?
What's wrong with Fujikai?
Well, John gave me one, and yeah, I drank it, I swallowed it. But so many people slate Fujikai, but a lot of people buy it.
Somebody's bought it, haven't they? Because we've all tried it. Somebody keeps giving it away.
I've not tried it. If anyone's got a sample,
what is it?
I'd be very.
Oh, what? Frank, don't do it.
Fujikai?
Frank, don't do it.
No one's going to release a whiskey that they think no one will buy. Like, no one's going to go, this tastes like shit. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bottle it and I'm going to sell it. So
exactly.
Whoever's made it must think it's got a market.
And look, I mean, my argument is all those people out there that are slating whiskies off left, right, and centre. Then you're basically saying that the people who are making this whiskey don't know what they're doing. And I don't care who you are. I think that is extremely disrespectful.
Yeah, but are some not doing that just to get attention, just to be provocative?
No, because the amount of money that they'd lose, and I just don't think that'd happen.
Look, I think the reality is that it's very easy for us as people that appreciate whiskey and look at it in a much different way that your average consumer will to look at something that's aimed at a consumer market, aimed at someone who is going to mix whiskey or who has never tried it, to go, oh well, it's rubbish in comparison to the sort of stuff that we're drinking. But actually accepting that things have a market and a purpose, and as Soren says, blends are the lifeblood of the whiskey industry. So long may they continue to be shit in our eyes.
Look,
yeah, but there's no need. Okay.
Look, I mean.
Are you okay there, Frank?
That's funny.
Frank's cracking me up.
I thought everyone was just filling the glasses up ready for me to say terroir.
3, 2, 1, go!
Nobody's got one ready.
I had to do this. You were talking about Fujikai, so I don't have any, but thanks to John, I have this incredible whiskey, which I'm...
Oh, I think I've got some of that.
Bruja de
I won't
Granada.
drink anymore.
Bruja de Granada. Terrible.
I had to try it.
What is it? What is it from?
It's basically Granada in Spain, and there's a distillery in Granada. It's a very small distillery, and they produce this whiskey, which is in the supermarkets in Granada, and it's not good.
I can tell by Frank's face.
And I won an award for it. So the first Drambury I went to, where they had a competition for best whiskey, and I caught wind there was going to be a worse whiskey, and I just tried that long, and I won.
Nice.
Thing is, I like how Frankie poured it back into the bottle and not down the sink.
Didn't spit a drop.
Yeah, his thought behind that one was somebody else can have it.
No, it just means it'll be great in an old fashioned.
No.
I don't like
over put in it. If you do it with 100.
But I think I will keep it to have from time to time you have to taste different things to make your taste bud
reset the palate.
Reset the palate. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it, Winston. Yeah.
The good. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, whiskey is about opinions, and the fact that I've sat down with many people, and we've argued about which expression is better, which one's worse, and just because we've not been able to agree, it doesn't mean to say that the whiskies we're arguing against are bad. It just means they don't suit us as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that doesn't come across. I mean, you read reviews and things like that, and sometimes they slate a whiskey off. And I mean, I read a review once, and it cracked me up because he was drinking a whiskey, and he slated it because he didn't like the shape of the bottle.
Really?
You're kind of thinking, but what made it even worse was the whiskey that was being talked about wasn't in an official bottling anyway. It was an independent bottle, but he didn't like the official bottling, so he slated it.
Very weird.
Sophie's getting ready for another shot. She's just turned around and said, "Are you going to buy one or not?"
Yeah, no, we've already done it. But no, it's really annoying.
3, 2, 1, go!
As someone who's sold whiskey to people for 3 years, the public are the worst when it comes to their own opinions.
Yeah.
Because what we did quite a lot of the time was pour whiskey and then get them to try it, and then once they've tried it, their preconceived opinions are completely changed.
Yeah.
It's because they will buy with their eyes before they actually try it. So that's what
but they also buy with other people's opinions.
Precisely.
Yes.
And getting back onto like age statements, for example, there is about 50% of the people won't touch non-age statements because they believe I won't drink anything that's below 15 years old, or I won't drink anything that's below 12 years old, which is absolute bullshit.
Because that's why we have to stand there and bust loads of myths, because
precisely,
fear.
And if we did have at the back of the label, like a makeup of the different casks or whatever, then they might change their opinion. But we're not able to do that due to the legislations and due to the law. And it's like a circle of me just getting pissed off all the time.
It's just complete elitism. People are like, oh no, Marjorie, no, we wouldn't ever drink anything under.
No, but then you turn it on those people. Yeah. And you turn around and you say to them, okay, you know your whiskies. Oh, yes, I know my whiskies. Brilliant. Let's do a blind tasting. And you give them something blind, and they haven't got a clue, and you just bust whatever they're thinking.
I think that's one of the big shames. I mean, I love watching Ralphie. I think his videos are great. He's got a little bit more opinionated of recent, but I mean, he's earned that right. But I'm pretty sure he still will not review a no-age statement. And I think that's a shame.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a shame, especially from somebody with so much influence who could... I mean, he's obviously got his reasons, and I can't remember the reasons he gave because I'm pretty sure he did quite early on.
But it's a transparency thing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's wrong, though. You know, if it's a good whiskey, it still deserves to be talked about.
Yeah, it's kind of it's sort of trying to change the world from his little sort of side of it, and you know, ultimately.
I mean, if it's about transparency, even putting a 12-year-old on a bottle doesn't tell you. All it tells you is that there's at least a 12-year-old in that bottle. Doesn't give the rest of it. I think there's mentioned a bit of snobbery. Like people who say they don't drink blends, and that's it, full stop. Like.
And then you describe what a blend is technically and just blow their mind.
And you look at some of the companies, look at what Weems Malts are bringing out, Compass Box, all these great people who are blending. And like all you say blend, and all they think of like bells and grouse. You know,
yeah, but it's also the term of vatting as well, isn't it? Like vatting is
that's
single malt. What's single malt?
That's exactly the same thing. Like people think about blends as being like, you know, impure because they don't come from, you know, they're not a single malt, they're not from a single distillery. And it's like, mate, everything's a blend.
Yes,
unless
exactly.
It's a
They
cask,
don't even realise that the whole single malt thing is, it could be 20 casks.
Yeah.
As long as it's from one
It's
distillery.
already a blend, mate.
Look, I mean,
Most
people
people
know
don't know that, though, do they?
No, but that's why we're there to educate them when we stood behind a bar, stood behind a stand.
Yeah. Look, people know my opinion. One of the best whiskies the year before last was a blended whiskey by Boutique. And see this Dave isn't here.
Rubbish.
It is
blends, I don't drink blends.
Fantastic.
That's nice.
Make an appearance, didn't they?
If that is a blend and people say blends are crap, then I'm sorry. That is fantastic whiskey. And I don't care who you are. There isn't many people that are going to go to that dram and say it's not good.
Yeah. It's because they just
50-year-old. All right, he's up to you there.
It's just miseducation. It's people basing their opinions generally on the guys down the pub, what their parents used to drink, and some of the actually crap media and marketing that's out there by some of the companies that still believe in leather chairs and that only men drink whiskey.
Yeah. I mean, look, you know,
but luckily we're getting away from that bit by bit, but it's just going to take time.
Ultimately, guys, you know, we're complaining about people saying that they don't drink blends, but they're the people keeping the prices down. You know, so if people don't want to drink blends, and you know, there's much demand for it, and we can pick them up at a decent price, you know, it's kind of like grain whiskey, isn't it? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is though, when you look at how people make a blend, you know, it's not easy. You can soon cock a blended whiskey up, and I mean, I know, you know, we all make a joke of teachers and grouse and things like that, but at the end of the day, look how much it's selling.
But look at Johnny Walker. How many goes into a Johnny Walker? It's 60 something sometimes. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean,
has anyone ever tried to make their own blended?
Yeah,
I've got an infinity bottle.
Yeah,
I did for a while.
How's that going, Claire?
I've only been doing my infinity bottle for about 6 months, and I haven't touched it yet. I'm just letting it do its thing. No, because I'm just going to let it do it. But at Milroy's, they've got 2 or 3 infinity bottles in the Soho, Soho Milroy's.
I've tried one of theirs. Yeah.
And they list every single dram that goes into it.
Yeah, that big book. They were nice enough to.
Yeah, they've even got a bourbon. Just an American whiskey stroke bourbon infinity bottle as well.
I've got a book that's got some recipes for blending your own. It tells you what malts to buy, and then it's got some recipes. But
we've got one too.
Yeah, it's like the Bartender's Guide or something. I guess something.
Yes, that's it. Such a good read.
Yeah, but you see, again, you go back to blends, and I mean, where is it? Got to put that bottle in.
Got me on the blend now, on the black and white.
Okay. Oh, nice.
I mean, you look at the Boutique World Blend. We've got to obviously mention it because Dave's not here.
That's another one.
You know, and you look at that, and I mean, I've heard a few people sort of saying it's not really, but it's not designed necessarily to be drunk on its own, and it's designed to be made into a cocktail or a highball or whatever you want to call them, and it is absolutely fantastic like that. And you can't knock it. Somebody say something.
Hey,
I've not tried it yet.
I've still got to try it with coconut water. That's the one I need to try it with.
Oh, I've not found any yet.
Yeah. Has anyone
I
tried the
can't find
green
coconut in
tea?
any shops, but
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
No.
My local Chinese supermarket has a green tea that is like not sweet at all, and it's really, really floral, and it
Nice.
like perfectly, and it's like £1 for like a massive amount.
I mean,
What did you try it with?
We have tried it with Spirit of Yorkshire's
Right.
maturing malt. We've tried it with Grant's. We've tried it with Bowmore. We've tried it with Aberlour. That's not shotting. That is long drinks.
She's still going to shot that one though.
I am 23. I'm allowed.
I'm 43. I'm definitely doing it.
I mean, the thing is, it comes back to, I suppose, drinking, like we've always said, you drink whiskey the way you want to drink it. I mean, I had an absolutely fantastic festival at York one year, and just previous to that, I think it was in Liverpool, I was working on the Paul John stand, and Shilton came up to us and said, put a bit of ginger ale or something in the edited. Absolutely fantastic. And, obviously I'm there going, don't think so. Absolutely fantastic. We went to York a couple of weeks afterwards, and this lady came up and she said, I don't like whiskey. I'm just here to accompany my husband, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what don't you like about it? She's just the taste. So we actually poured a little bit of ginger ale into the edited, and she took a sip of it and she's like, oh, I like this. I really like this. And said, right, well, there's the rest of the ginger ale, keep it if it means you're going to like whiskey. And she went around every stand and poured ginger ale into every expression she got. And she even went up to a certain chap on Boutique Whiskey and got the black token, which I think was a Mortlach back then, and poured ginger ale. And Dave was absolutely horrified. Well, not horrified, I suppose but obviously it was something discussed, and then she went on to another one. But it's like Dave sort of said to me afterwards, and I said to him, she enjoyed it. And it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's, but I think the thing that sort of upset a lot of people was the fact that she'd poured it in without trying it with anything else. But that was the way she decided to like whiskey. She came back at the end of the festival and said, this is the first bottle of whiskey I've ever bought. And she bought a bottle of whiskey.
That's a win. Yeah. That's a win for the industry.
It doesn't matter what she's bought. She'd bought a bottle of whiskey and she loved it. And I think it actually was a boutique. I don't think it was the Mortlach, but it was a bottle. I'm sure it was a bottle of boutique. I can't remember what was on the table back then, but we'd converted her, and that was the whole point of it. And that could have been a blended whiskey. It could have been anything. We
often have the opposite at State Whisky Festival because we always have some gins on.
Yeah.
We get people turn up and go, where's the tonic? We don't give you tonic. I've never tried gin on its own.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I always say to them is, how do you know what tonic and how much tonic to put into your gin if you've never tried it?
Yeah.
Every gin is different. It has a different flavour. It has a different strength to it. There's so many tonics out there that you can match it to that gin. And unless you've actually tried it on its own, you don't know how to mix it. And it goes the same with any spirit, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, kind of coming from a spirit drinkers angle. Emma likes her gin as well, and because you see me drinking whiskey neat, she's basically started drinking gin neat and looking.
Yeah, I don't have it with tonic really.
Yeah, looking for good kind of artisanal spirit makers who make nice gin that you can drink on its own. And that's like a really, really valid point. It's like that market is completely focused on mixing things, and you best have a good mixer because it's really important. But as a spirits drinker, I go, well, yeah, but then you can't taste the spirit. So it kind of depends on where you come from.
Mm. See, I think when you're making something like a highball or a long drink, it's not about the whiskey that you're putting in, it's about the overall taste of what you've created. I mean, one of my favourites was always what I call proper lemonade, so the old-fashioned lemonade made with lemons and things like that, and the old Auchentoshan Classic. And that was just beautiful. And that's what kind of half got me into whiskey. And I look around now, and I think, I've started looking at whiskies and thinking that one would actually work quite well in this, or it would work quite well with that. I mean, I don't drink a lot of variations other than whiskey on its own. So for me to start looking at different ways of drinking it, then, it shows we can all evolve. I mean, we might all get back to drinking shots.
Like me, yeah. I'll totally. I'll
if he's a leader in the field.
If you want it, as he's pouring, it's all great.
So we'll add Whisky Circus shot glasses to the order then.
Yeah, I'm going to say we'll have to go for the shot glasses next, won't we?
They're really nice shot glasses. They're made out of
copper. The shot glasses. How many people have got different sizes though?
Yeah, ours are massive. They're not really shot glasses. They're like
large.
They look like
need 50 mils.
They're red cups.
Yes.
Yeah, like cups instead.
I was going to say I didn't like egg cups.
Have you found the dimple in the side affects the flavour aromas as they like?
Means when you're really drunk, you can't lose grip of them.
Precisely. That's all that matters. Is the sweetness of the vessel.
What about the velocity of the liquid?
Josh.
Velocity or viscosity?
Viscosity.
Symmetry.
I mean, Fiona's just said add whiskey to Guinness or other stout to get a dog's nose cocktail. Never heard of that one, but I can't drink Guinness, so it's not going to help me.
If you haven't Guinness, drop a port in the top.
Yeah, sorry, it's because you've not tried it with whiskey. That's why.
Do you know, when I was younger, I want to say I was 15, but I better not. When I was a little bit older, we went to a promotional night for Guinness, and they were giving Guinness away in half pints for free, and I was the only one on the night having to pay for drinks. I couldn't drink it.
Love Guinness.
Yeah. Guinness and all kind of stouts are like the best thing ever, but I've never put any type of whiskey in. Fee suggested to put Isla whiskey, so like a really
Yeah.
But
I mean, I always do a port.
Not done that yet.
But I've never done a whiskey in Guinness.
St. Patrick's used to drink Guinness and Jedi honey.
Say that again.
I might be a bit heathen on this channel.
You need to say it in an octave higher so they can hear you.
On St. Patrick, we used to drink Guinness and Jack Daniel's honey.
I suppose that's the best thing for Jack Daniel's honey, though, isn't it?
No, it sounds minging.
It does say minging.
It does sound minging, but it's Jack Daniel's honey.
Yeah, but some drinks are minging, but when you actually mix them with something else, they become pretty palatable.
Like the sink.
Oh.
Hey, that's a good point, actually. Simon, didn't you do some drink with Marmite like yesterday?
Yeah, I saw this.
No, he did one with was it lime or something?
There was like an old-fashioned
no, you did something with
Marmite in it.
What was that, Simon?
It was that pissed he can't remember. Are you sure it wasn't Dave with his Marmite soldiers?
Gross. No, someone definitely did something recently with Marmite in a cocktail.
It'll be Dave. Dave's the only one that.
No, it wasn't Dave.
Yeah,
it wasn't Simon. Was it?
Wasn't that you, Simon?
Not
it wasn't
Simon.
you.
Not Simon.
He's denying it. I bet it was. Look, he's
oh, mate. Let's delete that tweet because I'm going to look.
I'm trying to find one.
What the hell was that?
Clearly results in amnesia, whatever he did.
I think the cocktail he'd made up was the knockout. He just totally knocked his memory out.
So the moral is do not mix Marmite with alcohol.
I suppose it's the only way it might be.
Everything.
I just can't drink not drink. I just don't like.
Yes, but Marmite every now and then they do special editions, and they've done a champagne Marmite and a Guinness Marmite, and it's absolutely bloody lovely. You can really
Do you think
taste
they do
it.
a Marmite that doesn't taste like Marmite?
Well, yeah, they did. They did a Marmite peanut butter for some reason.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
Good.
totally not worth it.
No
I
idea.
enjoyed
The
that.
ratios were incorrect.
Yeah, if they can make a gluten-free Marmite, that'd be
Literally,
nice.
I'm missing out on Marmite. I'm very sad now.
I just want to know how the hell a Whiskey Channel chat has got onto that talking about Marmite.
Oh,
Simon,
no.
what have you done to her?
We're a worldly bunch.
Marmite is it's like a yeast.
Yeast.
It comes from yeast, doesn't it? It's yeast
Yeah.
extract that you put on the top of like. Well, I personally put it on anything, but we can put it on like toast, bread. It's usually a type of carbs. It's also Vegemite and things like that.
And that's
But
why they did the Guinness one and the champagne one, because they used the yeast from it.
Well, I suppose it's
great in the bin.
It's a little bit like the question, I think it was Louise from JJ Corey asked earlier about, I think her husband had done toast with butter and then peanut butter.
No, see, that was wrong.
No, it's not.
No, that's right. You don't put butter on your toast and then peanut butter on top.
You always have to butter your toast, no matter what you're putting on it.
You've got to just completely agree.
I'm not one for having it on toast, but I mean, I love a thick wedge of bread smothered in butter and just lashings of peanut butter on top. But it's got to be smooth peanut butter.
How?
No. You are wrong.
Wrong.
It's got to be smooth.
Toast, butter, Marmite, peanut butter. That's the only way.
Hang on. What was that, Charlie?
How can butter be wrong?
Exactly.
Butter is good, but not with peanut butter on top.
Why?
No, it's good.
Oh.
I like a bit of butter under my peanut butter. You know. A bit of lubrication for your application.
Look, I mean, you've got to have a piece of bread that's about 2 centimeters thick. Then you've got to have a bit of butter on it that's at least 2 millimeters thick. It's got to be lashed on there properly. I can't believe
I can go with the thick butter, but not with peanut butter.
And then you've got to literally use the whole jar on that piece of bread.
Bovril. Chicken bovril and cardo. What's wrong with you, Simon?
What's he say?
Hey, Simon's from Coventry, says it all. They'll eat anything.
By the sounds of it, for next week, we'll have to make up the worst whiskey cocktail possible then.
Okay, yeah, I can totally get on board with that.
So for next week, worst whiskey cocktail you can think of.
Oh no.
We have a lot of ingredients that we can use. However, this was our Genepi bottle that has now
empty,
mysteriously disappeared from the fact that Saran keeps saying Tiwa.
Tiwa, no, Tewa. Are you just shotting on any word we say?
No.
Cheers. It's got to begin with T.
They've run out.
We've got about 10 minutes, but
I am not sure I can watch this.
Oh, you're crying.
I'm really not sure I can watch this. I had a bottle of Bovril blow up in my suitcase when I traveled from Dublin to Oslo in December.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Sight.
I'm actually worried about what Simon's making. Is it cardo and bovril?
It is.
Yeah, but it's chicken bovril that he's got.
Oh, that's like not.
I mean, chicken
bovril.
bovril's nice. It's like roast chicken in a hot drink, but not like this.
Not the time for cocktails, is it?
Oh my God.
Is that honey now?
That honey?
We're going to do a blue.
Oh, see what V said.
That's a compliment.
Yeah, well, it's
So what's
Sunday,
that?
That's a great
Pale out. Oh God.
Passion fruit.
It's a passion fruit pale ale, though. It's lovely stuff.
This is where you kind of get to the point where people say you drink whiskey how you want, but that's just wrong.
You're going to have to start taking Bovril, passion fruit ale and stuff to the festivals and honey.
No. No.
See you, Sarah.
Bye.
Sarah.
Bye, Sarah. Good to see you.
No, that's just wrong, Simon.
Just a knocking nail.
Crazy.
Just all waiting to see his expression when he actually drinks it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Did you actually put the bothering in?
He's going to pretend he likes it, you know.
Let's, let's all mute ourselves and pin Simon's video.
He's going to down it in one.
Nicked it.
I think on that note,
it's fine. I'm from Coventry.
He puts hairs on your chest.
Oh.
No.
We're never going to take anything you say serious again now, Simon.
Like we did.
No, we didn't do it in the first place.
Marks out of 10.
High five.
Frank's on the affinity.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
I quite like that.
What's the affinity?
Right. Hang on a minute. Right. Hang on. Right.